today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've learned over the last year and things that might stick around moving forward, things we've learned from the pandemic, as well as things we're looking forward to getting back to. And we're going to get into talking about coordinating the passing game. And joining me to discuss those things, the co-offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Washington State University, Craig Stutzmann. Craig, always great to talk ball with you and great to have you back here on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Keith, man. Always great to be on.
Well, Craig, it's been an interesting year, and you and I certainly have crossed paths and talked some over this last 12 months or so, from the different clinics that you've been involved in to just texting some things back and forth and phone calls here and there. But this year certainly has presented challenges. It's presented some opportunities to do new things, and the thing that's been of interest to me most as we look back on the last 12 months are what are some of the things that coaches have learned and maybe can continue now moving forward. So for you, what things come to mind with that? The things that you had the opportunity. Really, we all hit pause for a long time. We didn't know what was going on. We researched new things. We were forced into new things, but I think we also discovered that there's different ways of doing things. So for you, what were some of those?
Yeah, the first thing was the ability to communicate in a different way with your players and with recruits and high school coaches and coaches on staff. I mean, it's as simple as before this past 12 months or 13 months, whatever it's been, I was always a little uncomfortable with FaceTiming with recruits, or, just a little foreign to me. And, with how things have been structured and the way that we've got to get about doing things with Zoom and being on FaceTime a lot, I felt a lot more comfortable with that. And, that was something that I got better at. And now, FaceTiming and Zooming, I mean, that's awesome. I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it every day, whether it's with high school coaches, whether it's with recruits, or whether it's with players. Our players. Another thing that I thought the most beneficial thing for us here at Washington State was being able to be around our players a lot more with being mandated to stay, in your towns during COVID, during the pandemic and all that stuff early on. Typically when you come in as a new staff, right, you get in, you get back on the road and you recruit, and then you come back and you spend some time with your players, and then, you go back on the road and recruit again. And so being, stuck in Pullman, so to speak, it allowed us the opportunity to really work on the culture that Coach Rolovich wanted to create and has been great at creating, and being around our players during, a really tough time. I think a lot of people think of it as it was tough mentally, right, and emotionally to go through this. And what I think a lot of people fail to realize, that we're dealing with 17, 18 to 22, 23-year-old young men. And, although football is their passion and going to school is a top priority, the pandemic has really brought a lot of hardships, I think, mentally and emotionally to some of our players. So being able to be around them and comfort them and just, let them know it's going to be all right and we're going to be here for them was the first thing that Coach Rolla wanted to make sure that we did. So we were able to do that. And also we were able to talk a lot of football, being able to tell them not just how we're going to do things, but why we're going to do things, and build that trust and build that relationship and be around them a lot more time, and giving them that actual face time, I think was really important to Washington State and to what we were able to do. I think also schematically, it gave us a lot of time to really push the envelope and see, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is who we are. But are there different things that we could do to get better? A lot of times when you're on the road and recruiting, a lot of those things kind of get pushed to the wayside, and you don't really get around to that. And you say, gosh, man, I wish we would have thought about this earlier and maybe be able to work through it in spring ball or in the summer. So we got a chance to do some of that too. And then I just think overall, getting a head start on watching a lot of film of potential student athletes. I just know this before we started spring ball this year. Myself and our QC, Colby Castle, was able to look at over 160 something, 2023 quarterbacks, and being ahead that way and being able to look and evaluate the film for recruiting in the future, which is, the bloodline of any program is recruiting. we were able to kind of take a step further and be ahead in that respect. And it's been really good so far.
It's funny when, I heard you talking about, being comfortable being on FaceTime or Zoom or, those things have been around actually for a while. FaceTime feels like forever. Zoom's been about for a number of years, but, I don't think we were comfortable in, we had all those modes that we could get, network that way, learn from each other that way. We just weren't doing it. And when it became, that's the only way we had for a while, everybody got pretty good at it. Nobody has any issues now, getting on a Zoom or talking to somebody that way face to face. And it's just kind of crazy that it took us being forced into it, I guess, to get used to that form of communication.
Absolutely. And as we all know, a lot of times, right, we got to be put in the uncomfortable spot to wanting to change and be forced to change sometimes. And the Zoom thing and FaceTimes and all those things, it's really made us a lot more efficient, being able to communicate with our players and maybe, hey, I know right now, like I was talking to a couple of coaches in the NFL when they started first doing this, and they said, you know what, our players, they're professionals, but gosh, we limit this to like 40 minutes on Zoom. So, early on, we're starting to Zoom and we're going over some installs, we're going over plays, we're watching film. And, the first couple of times it was like an hour and a half, right? And so with the quarterback. So then I go ahead on the next Zoom call. It's kind of a recap, like what do they retain? And gosh, there was not much retention there. So as we all know, as being a great teacher is about not just teaching, but having the people that you're teaching, your students, being able to retain that knowledge. So then I started going with about 30 to 40 minute bursts of Zooms. And gosh, the retention numbers was up. Guys were a lot more engaged. You didn't see guys kind of like almost falling asleep on Zoom and stuff like that. So it was funny, like, just being efficient, streamlining these things. And if you are to make those Zoom installs, 30, 40 minutes or whatever, even if it's just one concept, you better be prepared like anything else in life, right? You better be prepared just like you're going into a position meeting if your players are coming into the room. So it taught us a lot, taught us to be efficient and how to really cater to the learning process for our players ultimately.
So moving forward, as things get back to quote unquote normal, what things remain? What things stick with you? It might not be all of the the different forms that we've used, but I guess maybe some of the methods, some of the strategies that had to go along with that.
Yeah, I think some things like some of the recorded Zooms, or we have a VR room where we have one of our camera guys will be back there and he'll record it and just forcing these guys to understand, like, hey, there are VR film here for you, even though it might be 6 months old. It doesn't matter. Like, get your reps in, because you don't know. I think what we learned in this offseason was we didn't have that much time to prepare for our first game, right? And there wasn't much time on the field. But guess what? Like, the rest of the Pac-12 didn't have that much time either. Like, we all were allotted the same time. And so what can we do and how can we be creative in preparing our players to not only be physically but mentally ready to play the game? And I think our players saw that side of it too, as, hey, we got to be even better with being diligent on watching film, or what are we watching, or how are we watching things, and also the time that they have to spend, right? We always talk about what makes the difference between ordinary and extraordinary, that little extra. Like, you got to go ahead and take your receivers out there and get the timing of these routes and learn, the body language of your receivers when they're running certain routes, and where do they like the football, and quarterback-wise, with our drops and with our eyes and with our reads, visualizing certain things happening and just getting those extra reps and pushing themselves to be great in that respect. And then also not being afraid to call or text and be like, hey, coach, can we get a separate Zoom time where we can watch film together? Hey, I don't really understand this. And understanding, like, just because you leave the building, the coaching from the player and coach's standpoint, just because you leave the facility, it doesn't matter. Coaching ends there. At any point in time, they can shoot a text message and be like, hey, coach, can we jump on Zoom real quick and go over, streak? Yes, absolutely. You know what I mean? So, hey, it's Sunday and we got practice on Monday. And hey, coach, can we just go over this script one more time? Absolutely. How can we get that done? Do you need an email to you? Do you need us to get on the Zoom and I can talk you through it? Can we draw some things up? So just using all those different avenues and understanding that communication is key to any success, and, being open and being creative with your communication and how you can reach your players so they understand things fully.
Were you guys able to find any efficiencies in the ways you again, were forced to do some of these things as a staff, not you guys to your players, but, you guys working with each other? Did you find any efficiencies in that?
Yeah. I will say this, we as a staff, we've been together for a few years now. So I think that helps a lot, right? Understanding what does 90 switch look like and what should it look like and all that sort of stuff. I think really where we were better at was being able to the evaluation in the recruitment process and how to get offers out and all those sort of things, I think happened a lot quicker for us because we were able to at any point in time jump on Zoom, or Rolla would shoot out a text message and say, on the text thread, hey, check this guy out. And we were able to get back and take a look at it as a staff pretty quickly. So those were one thing. But, gosh, when you're blessed to be around the same type of guys and the same coaching staff, especially on offense, as long as we have, I think, it wasn't as challenging maybe. And I don't think we're inefficient in many ways. So I think, it wasn't that big of a challenge, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. So looking at maybe things getting back to normal here, anything you're ready to say, we had to do it here, but I am glad to be moving back to the way we did it before.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime that you're physically around your players and physically around the coaching staff and you're in the building and, it's a different mindset, right? I think that was another challenge too, was doing work from home and having, a built-in office to your home and jumping through hoops on gosh, I think this is here, this is there. When you come into your facility, you come into your office, like everything, where things are, right? And it's a lot easier. It's a lot more efficient. So it's definitely great to be back in the building. It's definitely great to be back around our players. Be on the field with our players when we're allowed to, be in the weight room with our players when we're allowed to, and just continue creating that relationship and that trust.
Flipping the switch here and getting into our other topic, coordinating the passing game. It's something, you've done throughout your career, whether you've been the coordinator, co-coordinator, passing game coordinator, you've been able to divide things up. And I think that's just, again, whether titles go along with that or not, giving, certain coaches ownership in parts of the offensive game plan, I think is just an efficiency that you can find and really create some of that buy-in if people do have the ability to do those things. And obviously you want everybody to be able to contribute. But as you look at it, as the guy in charge of the passing game, where is your starting point for how you want to break things down and start looking at an opponent as you get ready for that next week?
Right. I think, everybody has their system. Everybody has their way. For us at Washington State, the first thing I like to do is we don't have very much formations. And so what that allows us to do is be able to really take out a lot of things that we're looking at from the opponent. We are able to focus in on, certain formations, certain personnel groupings, and being able to find consistencies in coverage keys. I think that is, primarily, I think that is really important to the quarterback. If we can, because I'll tell them this every time, right? So we go into a game and say we were just in an open set 2-by-2, right? And we're playing against, Team B, okay? And Team B is showing 10 separate coverages in the first 3 games of the season. We're playing them in the 4th game. Well, it's pretty hard to play quarterback when you got 10 possible coverages, and at the snap of the ball, you got to make a decision, right? Because run and shoot's dependent on route adjustments versus defenses and defensive coverages and leverages and all those things. So if we can limit, that 10 possible coverages down to 2 or 3, because we've done a great job of looking at film and identifying certain keys, well, guess what? Our quarterback's going to be that much better, and his probability of succeeding on every play is going to be better. If we can cut it down to about 2 or 3 possible coverages pre-snap, and post-snap, things happen, and our quarterback's able to decipher that. He's going to be successful. He's going to know where to go with the football. He's going to make good decisions, and he's going to make accurate throws. So the biggest thing right now, that we've had success with is going through our formation cut-ups, and then also down in distances too, right? And field zones, and just figuring out, what are the possible coverages. And the second thing is, looking at, all right, okay, they may not have shown this, but in their philosophy, or maybe, they've maybe it's not a high probability. Maybe it's only 1 or 2 reps of a certain coverage, but gosh, that thing might give our offense, our pass game, a little bit of problems here. We got to also practice that. Okay. So the first and foremost thing that I'm looking at, is just trying to find tendencies, try to find keys, and trying to help the quarterback understanding what coverage is he going to see.
Love to hear a little bit more about just your method in looking for those coverage keys, because I agree with you. Having, the last few years work with quarterbacks every single week during their season, just on film, right? And going through and letting them talk through their game plan, what their coaches have planned, and then looking at their opponents. One of the biggest things I was able to do with them was to say, all right, well, let's take a look at, how these guys are aligned right here. What are their tip-offs? What things start to make it easier for you, clue you in on this is what they're going to do based on alignment, a reaction to emotion, whatever it might be. What things do you look at? And again, I know it could vary a little bit from coach to coach with what you're using, but for you, what are the important things?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with identifying, what player is or what defensive player is in what position. And it's funny because, there was this big story. It's a big story in the NFL where I think Tom Brady is not very fond of the idea that guys are able to wear different jersey numbers, right? I think that was a hot topic a few weeks ago. And I understand that because, if you're able to go ahead and find out which player is in what position, whether it's a safety, whether it's corners, because if you're going corners over, then obviously probability is going to be man-to-man or whatever it is. But finding out where those guys are, is that boundary stand-up backer, right? It's like a Russian guy out there. Is he into the boundary? Oh, he's to the field. Okay, well, something's up here. You know what I mean? So I think first we do a good job of identifying what players typically are where, okay? And then understanding for quarterbacks on their receivers, depth and leverage give us a lot of things. Defensive back coaches or defensive coordinators, right? It's all about leverages. It's all about getting their guys in position to be successful. Well, that also, it gives us keys on what coverage could possibly come. The other thing, too, is we talk a lot about with the quarterbacks, what are the fronts? The first thing that we go through when a quarterback comes in our meeting, we will go through what is an over front, what's an under front, what's 3 down, what's there, what's this, what's that, what's a 3 technique, what's a 5, what's a 4, right? Because they got to understand anything that's closest to the football is the most important thing, okay? Everything's built inside out like anything else. So with that said, if certain players in the secondary, or maybe you see maybe safety rotation here or there, let's also identify the front. Where's the backers? Are the backers lined up where they're supposed to be typically in this front? Are they bossed over this way? Are they bumped this way? Is it a 4-1 box? You know what I mean? Because everything's going to be tied into the integrity of gap, being gap sound for a defensive front. And how are those backers and the secondary guys and safeties? How do they fit into that fit, so to speak, right? So we're looking at the game holistically. And I think if you just give your quarterbacks or receivers or whoever it is, your center, maybe just 1 or 2 tips or 1 or 2 guys that you're keen, gosh, man, and you're playing a really good defense coordinator or whatnot, you're going to have a hard time, right? We got to take a step back and look at this game holistically. And so as a quarterback, we're always looking at fronts, where's those backers at, where those safeties are, and what type of technique those corners are playing, where they're leveraged on the wide out. So I think when you're able to kind of get those guys dialed into it and understand, say, hey, number 5's the nickel out there, he typically lined up there. The free safety is number 10 and the boundary safety is number 1. Well, guess what? If those 3 guys are in different positions, then off of film, what does that tell you, right? Does that mean that there's pressure coming there? Does that mean it's more, man-to-man type coverage? Is it going to be like a 1 high zone? Do they get to their Tampa 2s or 3 double clouds? So I think, it's all encompassing, but kind of just teaching them that piece by piece so they don't get overwhelmed is a big part for us.
So as you start to break those things down and figure out, what coverages you're going to be attacking and maybe what might be some of the problem coverages, how do you go about then matching, that menu of what you want to carry into that game plan to be able to attack those things to maybe what you're going to leave out? Because, I know for me, we had 5 pass families, and I might carry 3 or emphasize 3, and the other 2 maybe have, very minor use in our game plan. But, again, making those decisions then based on some of that initial data you're getting from the defense, how do you go about that?
Yeah, the cool thing about the run and shoot is that essentially anything that you call can grow into a coverage beater, right? So we have very little concepts, in our offense where it's like, hey, if it's cover 2, then, you're dead to rights on this play because this concept isn't great versus it, or it's not going to work versus it. Everything that we do has route adjustments that gives the quarterbacks answers and the receivers the ability to get open. So I think rather than taking plays out or not running certain plays, it's more of we got to rep these plays against these potential coverages a lot and make sure our receivers are getting the proper depth, or they're making the right break, or they're making the right read. And the quarterback, his eyes start off in the right position. He's reading the right person, the right defender. The ball's going to the spot that it should versus coverage in our concept. So we don't really, how should I say, take plays out in certain situations. Now, yes, there are. If we're, say, on the 15-yard line, obviously we're not going to call concepts that call for maybe 40 yards, down the field depth with that spacing. We're going to call some concepts that's going to fit that spacing. But I think the other thing too, where a lot of coordinators are good and guys are understanding this is and I've learned this from talking with a lot of other coaches and guys in the NFL or guys around college or high school. It's like, right, defenses are getting a lot better at preventing big explosive plays. So we're seeing less explosive plays per play in a game. So what we have to do is we have to be better at understanding in certain situations what's the likelihood that we're going to get maybe a certain coverage, and how are we going to take our shot, or are we going to take our shot at this point in time in this situation? Okay, so with that said, like if you're a team that's a team that's going to go forward on 4th down quite a bit, well, everybody knows probably in America, right, 2nd and 2, hey, defense is they'd rather give a 1st down rather than giving up a big play over the top, right? So maybe 3rd and 2 is when you take your shot if you got 4 downs. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not. Maybe the situation calls for you to get the 1st down. So there's and these analytic reports, right, gives you those probabilities too on when you should go forward on 4th down and all those sort of things. But I think it's pretty cool when you put together a game plan like you said, and that's why we do have all of our coaches, offensive coaches on staff, has certain types of zones or that on the call sheet that they're responsible for situations, because there's only so many hours in a day and there's only so many hours in a week to prepare, and everybody was hired because they are good at what they do, okay, and they're responsible for what they do. They're accountable and they're smart coaches. So giving responsibility to those guys to be, say, in charge of really, the responsibility is third downs, or or it's red zone, tight red zone, high red zone, whatever it is, being able to go ahead and distribute those responsibilities to those guys calls for, I guess, more attention in that area, and they can better explain to us, hey, why we want to do it. Because football is all about why, right? It's not about just how, it's about why. And I think once we understand the why and the players understand the why, then it becomes a lot more fun, because now you're cooking with gas. You know why things are happening, you know why you're doing things, and there's a high level of understanding. But I don't know if that answers your question. I know that was a little roundabout way of getting to it, but I think that's the juice right there.
Yeah, definitely answers the question. Kind of, I guess, an offshoot of that. Then you mentioned other people looking at things for you and bringing that together. And you look at the word coordinate, it means to bring together, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to be the guru of everything. Certainly, you want to be the most knowledgeable, but as far as meeting with your coaches, your guys who are assigned different areas, and bringing all that together, how does that come about for you? What has been the most effective way for you to bring that together and to make those decisions?
Yeah, so every day, right? Whether it's you're doing normal downs on a Sunday, or you're doing Monday, you're doing third downs, and Wednesday or Tuesday you're doing red zone or whatever it may be. At the end, we typically have the first half of the day to kind of go over, our film and what we're trying to get done. And, once that's done, we go ahead and we meet all together, and, we'll go around the room and just basically give a little presentation on some of the things that we're thinking, some of the things that we saw on film. And, maybe there's a couple of new ideas, because we don't ever want to be robots. We don't ever want to say there's only one way we do things here at Washington State and the run and shoot. There might be a new concept that we might like. Hey, guess what? The team that played, on offense against the opponent the week before, maybe they have a concept that's pretty cool, and maybe that fits. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? We got to find what fits our offense and what makes sense to our players, and not just throwing something that like, oh, okay, hey, guess what? This team did something crazy versus the opponent, and gosh, man, we could make it work too. Well, if that's not what we do, and it doesn't fit what we do, then how do we expect our players to understand it and execute it at a high level? So, there's a fine line with that. But yeah, we'll come together at the end, and there might be a concept, whether it's pass or run or a screen or anything like that, or a new RPO that maybe we can go ahead and it might fit. And, Robo's great about giving us the flexibility to maybe have a little bit of fun with it and see if it'll work, and have maybe one or two plays in practice where we practice it. And sometimes it looks awful, right? It looks great on the whiteboard. But when you have your players do it, it's like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? And there's some times we're like, ooh, hey, I think we got something here. So there's a lot of experience in our offensive staff room from various universities previously and different levels. And, it doesn't matter if it's high school ball or if it's professional ball, and everywhere in between, Pop Warner, whatever it is. Like, football is football, and good football is good football, and good plays are good plays. It's just all about execution.
Yeah, you mentioned having that idea that maybe you see, will attack the other opponent. Other people have made it work, but, that fit within not just your own offense, but also your thought process as a guy who on game day is making those decisions and making those calls and making sure, okay, when it's a passing down, we're calling this play. It took me really deep into my career to understand that some of those ideas that come up, even ones that are my own, I'm not going to feel comfortable calling them because it doesn't fit in a certain way, and I can remember eventually getting to that point, like telling a coach, like, I love that idea and this looks great, but here's why I'm not going to put it into the game plan, because here's where, there's a sticking point in my thought process, or how I think this might not fit with us. That's, I think, when you could get to that point, when you understand those things, it's not, just dumping on somebody's idea, but it's really, I think, getting that clarification for everybody. When you can understand that and communicate it to everyone, I think everybody starts to be able to get on the same page a little bit better and start to see things through that lens. Not that you want everybody thinking the same way, but at least you need some kind
Right.
of filter for those things that people aren't going down a road and wasting time.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, you know, I think as long as everybody's on the same page, everybody understands, hey, there's a lot of great ideas out there. It doesn't matter if it's triple option or if it's, you know, wing tee or run and shoot or whatever it may be. You know, there's so many good football plays out there, but it's what we're comfortable with. And if coaches have creativity, it's at least letting them voice like, okay, what do you like about this and why? And maybe sometimes it fits, maybe sometimes it doesn't. But like you said, when it's all said and done, you know, there's decisions that have to be made and tough decisions have to be made. And as long as, you know, everybody understands why and we get on the same page with it, and move on, we're going to be great. And I will say this, you know, for us here at Washington State, a lot of times what I like to do with the quarterbacks and Rolo likes to do too is that, like, hey, if this player, this quarterback, this starting quarterback is not comfortable with this concept, and we'll do this Friday night, okay? I'll go ahead and we'll get the game plan and we'll go through it with the quarterbacks and we'll take a look at it and say, hey, take it to bed tonight. So they go back and take it to bed, and I say, I want you to cross out the plays that you don't like. I want you to circle the plays that you like, and I want you to star the plays that you guys love, okay? In every situation, just go ahead and get that done. And in the morning, we'll come back, we'll talk about it again, okay? We'll talk about it again, and then we'll go to Rolo and Brian, and we'll say, hey, like, this kid doesn't feel comfortable with this. This guy doesn't feel comfortable. He loves this. He loves that. So at least there's an idea there of, you know, the guy that's pulling the trigger on the field, the players, you know, and we'll even ask receivers. We'll ask running backs. We'll ask whoever, lineman, whatever it is. Like, what do you guys love? What do you guys don't love? Because when it's all said and done, you know, the power of positivity and, like, the belief is probably one of the most powerful things out there. And if the guys believe in this play in critical moments, and guess what? The likelihood of it working is pretty dang high. And so players play the game. Coaches coach and help out. We gather information. We disseminate through some of that stuff and we give it to them. But players play the game. This is a player's game, man. So if those guys feel comfortable with things and they love it and they're confident, then guess what? Why not call those plays? Because they're the ones that's going to execute and make it work.
I highly recommend that exercise with your quarterbacks. I've had several guys on this podcast who talk about doing exactly that. I know Andrew Coverdale, who now is at St. Xavier here in Ohio, an incredible high school football coach, has that meeting. He has his love it, like it list with his quarterbacks, and something
right.
I would do as well. And I found, you know, we would do it with all of our quarterbacks, not just the starter. Early in seasons, and I just talked about this with somebody. I honestly can't remember if it was on the podcast or in a separate conversation, but I found I would kind of watch quarterbacks, you know, especially the younger guys, as the older guy was up there talking through what he liked and whatever, and found those guys starting to mirror him. And so sometimes I'd have to do the meeting separately, where I'd have,
right.
you know, the number one guy go up there and be honest with me, and then the number two guy do it separately, you know, because I didn't want him to think, especially the number two, that this was some kind of, you know, I'm not testing you. I really want to know what you feel most comfortable with. And I think the younger guys struggle with it a little bit more. The starter's going to do it because that's, I mean, his right. job's on the line. But you need to know from right. those backups too. They're a snap away, right? You need to know from them, where are you most comfortable, because if things change, that's where I want to be able to put you.
Absolutely. Rolo makes sure every weekend, it's funny because I know what he's going to say, but he always has to say it, right? And it's true. And it's find out not just what you start, but, hey, what is so-and-so like? You know, what is so-and-so? And we go down for the guys that's on the roster or the guys that's traveling. So the top three quarterbacks, like, what are they like? What are they not like? Because it's like going to a restaurant, right? If you're going to go to a restaurant and you got a chance to talk to the chef and you're like, hey, what do you love to cook? And if that chef tells you what he loves to cook, then he's probably going to cook that thing really, really good. He knows the ins and outs of it. You're not going to go to a chef and say, hey, what do you like? And he says, or what do you don't like? And he tells you what he really don't like. And okay, make that. He's not going to put that effort into it, or he doesn't truly believe in that recipe or whatever it is. There's no difference in playing quarterback and really playing football. So, but yeah, being able, and I will say this, it's funny. We just had a meeting the other day, and, Jaden DeLauro was our starting quarterback last year. He was a freshman. And I remember telling him every week, like, hey, what do you like? What do you don't like? Oh, coach, I like everything. No. Okay. If you had to take out, I'm telling you, if you got to take out 10, which 10 you want to take out? None of them, coach. I like all of them. You know what I mean? So, like, yes, or the meeting the other day that we had, we did an exercise, and then I said, hey, so remember what we talked about, before the games and this and that. I said, now what would you take out? He goes, oh, coach, I probably would have taken out at least maybe 20 of those. I'm like, well, then, I think a lot of it has to be, like you said, the younger guys, being secure in understanding it's not a test. It's not to bash you. It's, hey, what do you like? We're just trying to help you out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
right.
But that's true, man. That's probably the best thing. That's the best advice that I got from Matt LaFleur. I got to know him years ago, and I said, what do you love? Like, what's the one thing that you will do before the game? He goes, I make sure that I tell those guys, if you don't like it, take it out. If you love it, make sure you tell me, because we're going to call the plays that you love.
Absolutely. I know another great idea I picked up, and I'll preface this by saying, for me, scripting was a very detailed function for me, in that I wanted to know how many reps over the course of a week could I get a particular play, and really pay attention to that. However, a coach shared with me what he does with his quarterbacks, and it's not every period, but he'll do it. I think this is a good one for spring ball. I think it's a good one for camp, and maybe you do it for a period or two during the week, but let them call the plays. Let them, this is what we're going to run right now, and put it in their hands. Go through and take notes, have somebody write down, all right, these are the things he called. Because I would bet in there, he's going to be in his confidence area, right? He's going to tell you through that period that these are the things I feel best about because I'm calling them. Or, maybe you get that guy as you start to stretch him within those to think outside his framework a little bit and try to get more confident in some of those other things. But I thought that was a good exercise, something that I think anybody can insert into. Again, it doesn't have to be in season if you're not comfortable with that, but certainly camp or spring ball.
It's funny that you mentioned that. We'll do that in our routes on the other period. Where we have our coaches, we're giving them a look on defense, because everything's route or coverage related, right? Everything's based off coverage. So we'll be on there playing defense, and it's funny you say that. Rolo will, once a week or something like that in routes on air, he'll just be like, hey, you guys call it. Okay. So every route, or whatever, every concept, every rep, each quarterback will rotate calling a play, and all four quarterbacks will throw it to the four receivers. But yeah, it's a good exercise to see what they're comfortable with. And also that's a moment right in practice where you can test their knowledge and say, well, this pairs up front side with this backside. Hey, this doesn't pair up with it. And that clues us into, okay, we got to maybe spend more time with him understanding what pairs with what on certain concepts. The other thing, too, that it was the same meeting about taking out plays or keeping plays in. What do you like? What do you love? What do you not like? And all that stuff. I'll tell those quarterbacks, if you want a certain rep in like a concept or RPO or whatever it is, whether it's 7-on-7s or if it's a team period or scout period, whatever it is, just text me. Tell me, hey, coach, can I work this concept? Text me. I'll go ahead 5-10 minutes before practice starts, and I'll change your rep to what I have in there, and I'll put that in there, because it's what those guys want to get practice at. They play the game. It comes back down to the players play the game. So, yeah, I'll tell them it doesn't matter if it's the night before, if it's right after our position meeting, or if it's an hour before practice. If there's a certain type of concept or few concepts that you want to work, text it to me and I will put it in for your reps. And so, and I think that's the beauty of not having, the running shoot where you have, 10 personnel and you got limited formations. And we don't have a lot of plays. We have quite a bit, but we don't have a ton of plays. So our quarterbacks are able to go ahead and tell you, hey, this is what I like to work, and we can plug it in, and it doesn't really, set us back at all.
Absolutely. Coach, moving things along through the process then, you make your decisions and you start putting together a call sheet, right? And I'm always interested in what call sheets look like, but also then how you prioritize calls. Like what's going to be that first call in a certain section of the game plan down to, whatever might be, let's say your sixth or your eighth or whatever the last one is for you. How do you guys go about prioritizing those?
Yeah, the first few plays will always have, it's really based on the opponent that you're playing. There's some games that will go in that will say, hey, we want to have various formations to see how they line up to it. There's some times where we think that possibly there's a shot opportunity in the first five, so we'll take a shot in that first five. And there's some times where it's like, hey, you know what? We just want to go ahead and just play good football in the first 5 plays. What's our 5 best plays we've been, feeling comfortable with? So I think a lot of it is opponent driven. It's not really, this is how we do things and we're stuck to this ways. It's a feel thing. So, I'm trying to think back, and there's not something that we say, hey, this is exactly what we're going to do every first 5, but it's various. And then what Rolo likes to do is he likes to give it to the players the night before the game, so the players can visualize, what the play call is going to be, and they can visualize, if you're the receiver, the Z receiver here, and you got this route concept versus this coverage, and you're going to, what does it look like for you to beat that defender, and what does it look like in your mind of catching that football and scoring the touchdown, and what are you going to do after you score the touchdown? So it gives them that visualization, and that's a powerful thing too, is a guy's got to be able to see it before it happens. That's what practice is for, and that's what the power of visualization is for. Big proponent in that, and I think especially with the quarterbacks and with every player, I think it doesn't matter what sport it is. It doesn't matter if it's baseball. It doesn't matter if it's basketball, making the game-winning shot. It doesn't matter if it's boxing. What does it look like, shadow boxing, all that stuff. The visualization and understanding of what the plays are going to be, especially in the beginning of the game, and making those guys feel comfortable with it, is powerful. So, it's not always the same. It's not always the same philosophy going into the first 5. But at least we give those guys the first 5 before the game or the night before the game. And then, the call sheet, one side is base plays, the other side is special situations. And, some things could change here and there. If we got a new play, maybe we take something out, maybe we don't. But that is probably the most consistent thing about our game is our call sheets, just because we don't have a lot of plays and we rep it a ton versus defenses, and we're a counter-based offense.
With that, as you're looking at the different situations, do you put any time into thinking about your firsts in a situation? So as an example, the first time you're in a 3rd and long, this is the play we feel best about. Do you guys try to organize those before the game? Yeah.
So those special situations on the 3rd downs, there is a priority on that based on what type of coverage, what type of front, is there going to be pressure, probabilities, and all those things. But, it's like anything else in football, right? After the first time you kind of get to those situations, you get a feel for what's going on. Then you may skip, to what's on the, maybe, 3rd and long, you call this play, and all of a sudden you realize that this is the coverage or this is what's going on defensively. You look down that priority list or that list of plays in that 3rd down situation, like, that second one's not going to be good. Let's get to the 3rd or the 4th one. You know what I mean? So it's all based on, that scouting report and what do the numbers say. But, as any good coordinator, any good coach, once the game's going, man, you got to be able to adjust, right? You see the same thing. Coaches are too good. Defensive coordinators are getting too good, like keeping you on your toes and changing the pictures for you and making the quarterback and the offensive line feel uncomfortable. So the ability to adjust is as important as the ability to prepare, I say. So, that's kind of how we roll.
I've always viewed the game as a series of mini game plans. Just like you said, once things get going, things start to change. And I know in the few minutes I have between series, it's always about getting our information together. For me, when I would split that up and really get our offensive line coaches' feelings on both the run game and protection, and myself with the passing game, going through, getting that feedback really quick, and then putting together, all right, here's what the next series might look like, and even pulling in some of those situational things. Okay, we hit a 3rd and long in this one. It's going to be this, 3rd and medium's this. If we pop into the red zone on a big play, here's where I'm going next. Just thinking about all those things, again, like I said, kind of the mini game plan, all these little mini game plans within a game. What's your approach between series?
Yeah, we'll do the same thing. So, Brian will get on the headset. He'll ask kind of, hey, what do we like in the pass game? He'll talk to our offensive line coach, Mark Weber. Hey, what do we like in the run game? Kind of the same thing, kind of putting together, or what kind of RPOs do we want to run in this series? Rollo will jump on and we'll kind of talk through some of those things to see if the next series we can get those play calls out. The other thing that I really like about, I guess it has to do with the dynamic of our offensive staff and not having egos on anything, but just wanting to be successful, is that as the game is going and, the series is going, like if Rollo sees something or Brian sees something or I see something, we have, we have an open dialogue of, hey, let's get to this. Like essentially we have 3 or 4 coordinators on the offensive side of the ball. It's like 5 coordinators, whatever it is, like, hey, let's get to this. And there's any time where anybody in the headset says, no, I just want to do this. So it's pretty open. And a lot of times those are where the big plays hit, you know what I mean? Because we're all watching the game from a different perspective, right? Everybody has the responsibilities of where their eyes are, right? So if somebody sees something, a chink in the armor in a series, and there's a suggestion, well, we suggest it. And a lot of times those have led to big plays. And that's been really cool about our offensive staff. And I think it's really a testament to the relationship that we have and the trust that we have in one another. That's pretty cool. Now, I got a question for you. So if, I've heard some people that at halftime, they'll go ahead and maybe create another first 5. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah, definitely. It ranged from going and creating a new first 5 to looking at the success of what were the first things, we did when we came out in the game. How many of those apply, or what tweaks can we make to them? We had a lot of success with our openers and, putting those together. And we had a process for that too. So I'll take a step back on the openers. And I got this from Ian Shoemaker who's now the offensive coordinator at Eastern Washington. He was my predecessor at BW and used to go in clinic with him. And on Wednesdays after practice, they had their two main working days, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday after practice, everybody would come in and put, I can't remember how many we'd do. I think everybody put their top 5 plays on the board, right? They just went and wrote their name and wrote those 5 down. And then it started a conversation. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to go through and pick all these. It started a conversation between us. Why'd you put those up there? And so that was a useful exercise. And so halftime kind of would work a little bit as, very quickly, because you don't have a lot of time for all the discussion, but a mini, I guess, planning period like that where, we're getting that input from the guys. Everybody had a different thing they're looking at, things they would get from their players as well. And we would put those together. We usually went with 10 to start. At halftime, I think we did cut that in half and go with 5 because we were just in like I said, kind of just planning that next series. But it would go into a little bit more consideration on these are the things we really want to focus on in the second half.
Right. No, that's cool. I've heard of that. I've never really been exposed to anything like that before. Obviously you go in there and talk through what was successful for us, and what do we want to get back to, and, what are we thinking their adjustments are going to be, and kind of creating another menu or maybe kind of cutting down the list of stuff. But I've heard of of that before, but I've never kind of gone through or been a part of a staff that has done that before. So I've always wondered about that.
The best part of when you do any openers, whether that's out the door in the second half or at the beginning of the game, is when you can get done with that list and you all agree, like, let's run that list again. And that's happened before.
I was going to say, what about, so you guys have repeated like a list before?
Yeah, always.
Like repeat the openers.
We did. And I studied heavily Brian Billick and Bill Walsh and how they would game plan. I can't tell you how many times I read Billick's book, but, they would talk about their first 10, but we really wouldn't go through that first 10 and worry about, like, what if we're in, third and long on this play, or what if
Right.
we end up in goal line, because if we hit a situation, we kind of would always look at what's the next play. Okay, I feel good about it, roll with it. Or, it doesn't fit for this right now. Then we just go into the situational. If we are successful and get back
really
on,
got through that whole
right.
list.
If we got back on track, like let's say it was a third and long and the next play was a run. Well, we're going to our third and long. We pick up the first down, then we're back to the next play. And that's not anything I invented. That's how Billick and Walsh would do it.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I like that.
So I guess moving things forward, we've talked about the game here, the adjustments, halftime. You get done with the game, and it's time to evaluate. Not only how did our players do, but evaluate yourself as a coach, because I think you have to be doing that too. You have to be not only looking at, all right, what was the execution of our players, but what was my decision making like. And that's not always the first thing I think you look at, right? I think there's that turnaround that's pretty quick, the focus on the players, but at some point you're evaluating that game plan before you head into the next week. What kind of things do you look at, and just evaluating yourself, your staff, the decisions made, et cetera?
Yeah, I think, to kind of backtrack a little bit, throughout the week of game planning, I like to, in my computer, I hold a list of things that happen throughout the week and I do it on a daily basis. So like, what did we do, maybe in the skill position, quarterback, and each person in, what were they doing well in practice that week? What did they struggle with? Why? And how did we try to like help them? You know what I mean? Through practices, like what were we trying to do to help that person be successful? And keep a running tab. And so what I did was at the end of the games, or what I do is at the end of the games on Sundays, after watching the film, is, okay, looking back at maybe some of the mistakes that were made. Were they the same mistakes that happened in the practices? And if there are consistencies, there's fine consistencies in there, then we got to either fix it. Like our job as coaches, we got to fix it. Did we not show them the look enough? Did we force that concept? Did we force this type of play on them when really probably wasn't good? I mean, gosh, look at the evidence. Like the evidence shows us that they weren't good at it all week. Then why are we going to do it on Saturday night when it counts? So I think there's a lot of self-reflection in that time. And then also, as we're going through, we're watching the film, we'll grade it individually. Then we'll come back together as the offensive staff, and then we'll go ahead and we'll watch it as a staff again, and we'll talk through some of the things of gosh, that's my bad. I told him this, or or whatever it is, or try to find out what those decisions were by the quarterback or any other position, and how we're going to remedy this problem if it is habitual or whatever it is. And so and then we talk through, like, in certain situations, maybe we should have got this call, or maybe we should have had this instead. And there's that fine line too, right? You don't want to offend anybody, and we're working towards a common goal, but at the same time too, though, like, we got to get this thing right. If not, it's just going to continue on, and we're going to have consistent discrepancies throughout the whole season, ultimately losing football games, and we don't want that to happen. We want to get our players in the best position to make plays. So, there's a little bit of talk and dialogue there too, but I think that's kind of what the process looks like. And then at the end of that meeting, the offensive meeting, then we'll have a full staff meeting, and Rollo will go through the room and ask each position coach, what were some of the things they did good, what were some of the things that did bad, and and explain why they were good and explain why they were bad, and what we're going to do to go forward. And the good thing is Rolo's typically in our meetings offensively, so he knows what's going on. He understands what's going on, and ultimately it's not like anything that he doesn't know, from watching the game. The other thing too, what I like to do, since Rolo played the position at a high level, and he's coached quarterbacks all over, is throughout the week, I like to ask him, is there something that you want me to work with these guys more, or with the quarterbacks? Is there something that you don't like that I'm doing with them, or whatever it may be? Because ultimately it's his team and it's his program, and I want to do right by him. So I'm always putting down the ego and going in to talk to the head coach and just ask him, like, hey, is there something that you want me to change? And a lot of times he'll say, no, I think what we're doing is great. I think, the drills that you're doing is great. It's getting them prepared, and there's some things that sometimes they'll say, hey, I think we're neglecting this. Let's get them this, or let's, drill this, or let's get him to do this, or his eyes aren't right on this concept. And so constantly having a guy like Rolo right down the hall from me, that's our head coach, that's able to communicate that to me. And again, a lot of times the head coach has a lot of other things that's going on in his mind. So as a position coach, as a coordinator, whatever it is, going to the head coach and just asking him, because sometimes, he's busy. He's not he may think of something in the middle of the day and forget by the time he tells you at practice, right? So I think just always being on the same page and just asking him, how does he see things going, and just making sure that you're doing right by the head coach is always a great thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that quality control part is so important. I agree. You have to handle it tactfully, because you are working together, right? It's not about
right.
Knocking somebody down. It's just about making sure everybody's on the same page and you're moving forward together. There's something I thought about as we're talking a little bit about looking at those things, and this became something that was effective for us, and it started with our openers, as I mentioned before, and it kind of expanded from there. But one thing we would do as we were putting together our openers is I would pull those from the practice clips through the week, and we would voice over those first 10 as to what we were thinking and a little bit about why we were doing it, and that was shared with our players. So they would get our initially it started just with our openers, right? We would send it out that way. And we started looking at, this is, we don't necessarily carry a ton. Like our third and mediums were somewhere in the 6 to 8 range, if I remember right. Third and longs, were less, or third and shorts were less. So here's the few plays we have on here. Let's go back through the week, and we would put the playlist together like that, so I could go and pick from there those reps. And I can tell you this too, as I would go through and look at it, it was like a final quality control. Like, we really looked bad at this play this week. I'm not sure I feel good about calling it. It might get scrapped, right? Or maybe there was a key thing you needed to review if you were going to carry it. But those short voiceovers, and none of these were more than 4 or 5 minutes long, so we keep the players' attention. But what key coaching points could we share that way? And what made me think about it though is it was our quality control, right? Because we're thinking something, but you have to go back through that course of the week, and if you didn't have a good week on that play, boy, I'm not sure you want to call it.
Right, absolutely, and I think that's a great point. I like to spend a lot of time. We don't do too many voiceovers with our plays on video as much, just because with our offense in the run and shoot, there's so much information that could be shared, and sometimes if you forget to say it, then does it be is it taught? And again, there's a lot of different ways to do things, but what kind of that whole quality control thing, I like to do that on that Friday nights, or if we're playing a lot of games out here, is on Saturday nights. And even while we were at Hawaii, we had Saturday night games. We'd meet extra on that Saturday morning, that one last time, and again, it's asking them, hey, you're getting this coverage and this is the play. Where's your eye starting, and have them talk through the plays. I think that's another great exercise for those guys to do, because not only it's about what they know, and if they can voice it, then you feel confident that they know what they're doing. And the other thing too is the other guys, they're going to learn. I think that's where we probably struggled a little bit last year, was we didn't have as much peer-to-peer leadership as successful teams typically do. And I think that's a way to build that peer-to-peer leadership, is having your players talk through plays and explain it to the other younger players or other guys, right? And so that's a lot of things that we do. I know we're going off subject here, but that's a lot of things that we do here. Is we have an open dialogue a lot of times. So these guys can talk to one another, because when you get to those player-led practices in the summer, right, coaches aren't out there.
Right.
So they better be able to coach each other up. And if they can't verbalize and they can't communicate to what we want as coaches for them to be able to do, then you got the blind leading the blind out there. Then it's like, gosh, is this player-led practices even worth it, or is it hurting us more? What's the value in it? But yeah, getting back to what you said about just those, quality control, and you're right. You got to look back at practices. You got to look back at Monday. You got to look back at Tuesday. You got to look back at Wednesday. The cleanup Thursdays, whatever it is you want to call it, final Fridays. And you got to see, man, if in those critical moments in situational football, that's all football. It's situational football, man. If it's third down or it's red zone, and gosh, there's a turnover or there's just a bad read or intercept or whatever it is, like, do we really want to put that out there when our jobs are on the line in this critical moments? Right. You know what I mean? Right. Like, if the players want to win the football games, and gosh, the last thing you want to hear, right, is come off the field and you hear in the distance when your players say, that was a dumb call. You know what I mean? That's not cool. That's not right. So I like that exercise that you talked about, though.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things you can look at, and we shared a lot of ideas here, and it's not necessarily practical to do every single thing we talked about, as we've reviewed different ways we do it and different ways other people do it. But I think there's a lot of tools that you can look at and really vary throughout the course of the season. I mean, sometimes you need to switch things up to get things going. But it was a great conversation here. I know you are going to be back on the road. Recruiting is opening up. We got camps going. For our listeners, Coach, what areas of the country are you recruiting?
Yeah, I'm going to be down at the SMU camp, Florida State camp, and I think it's right June 5th is SMU, June 6th is Florida State, June 7th. I want to say it's Georgia Tech, and June 8th, Kennesaw State. And then we have our own camp here on June 19th, and then I'll be at the UNLV camp, I believe it's June 27th. We have another set of coaches that are going out, and they're going to hit up Sac State, and I think the Redlegs camp. And, say that real loosely, because who knows what's going to happen, and everything's changing every day with COVID protocols and mandates and all that stuff. But, you can go on our Washington State Twitter. It'll have all the camps, on an edit of where each coach is going to be and what coaches, and what camps you're going to be at. So I encourage guys to go check out, our Washington State football Twitter. And the more that we can see, and help out, and gosh, we can't sign everybody to Washington State, right? But if we can just help, any student athlete get better in any way, and help them get to achieve their goals to play Division I college football, that's what we're really here for. Because, the logos may change on our polos, but we're here for the common goal of giving these young student athletes an opportunity to achieve their goals and teach them life lessons throughout. So that's what we're about.
I love that, Coach, and I really appreciate you taking the time to make coaches better here today and sharing some information. And for those guys out there, one last thing, where they can find you on Twitter. At
Coach Stutzmann.
Coach, as always, great to catch up with you. Best of luck to you as you and the Cougars get out on the road here this summer and looking for those future guys, and certainly best of luck in the 2021 season.
Hey, thanks, Coach, and I appreciate any time I have to get on here and talk ball with you. And, what you're doing for football is a great thing, and we appreciate you more than you know.
Thanks again for listening to the Coach and Coordinator podcast. Please check out all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com. We've got some great things coming for you in May, and for the last 3 months or so of this offseason, we'll be back with All In on Offense and our deep dive on defense. And we have some great interviews with coaches, as well as some quick casts that we'll throw in there. Check out all we're doing again at coachandcoordinator.com, and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.